So this is not X, this is the quotient. With manifold, it's easier to look at the quotient, but with metric space, we'll work on the space itself for practical reason. But let's look on this picture. So this is red, yeah? So there is a loop here which corresponds in X to the action of some element. We'll see this later. And if this loop is small, there is a big neighborhood, which is called a Collar. And this is called Collar theorem. So if this loop has length eta, so there is a big neighborhood whose length is something like C times log of eta in absolute value, because otherwise log of eta is negative, which is a cylinder, right? Okay, so the goal of our part is not to describe this cylinder. The goal is to say that it does not cover completely the quotient. Well, for Riemann surfaces with hyperbolic metric, I'm sorry, when I think to Riemann surfaces, I'm a Riemannian geometer, so I think to constant curvature metric, whereas it's more or less equivalent to the complex structure, but not exactly. So for Riemann surfaces, you can see on the picture that it's not completely a cylinder. It's not covered by a cylinder. But we have to prove it in this situation. But what we want to do is mimic this situation, right? So let me recall other definitions that were used this morning. So first, we'll assume that gamma, for the sake of simplicity, is so-called torsion-free. So Gilles said it this morning. So torsion-free means that for any gamma in gamma, gamma to the k is not equal to the identity for k non-zero. So there is no element such that some power is equal to the identity. And in fact, it corresponds to not having fixed points. But if I don't need it, I don't say it. And we assume also that, so gamma is torsion-free, and gamma is non-elementary. I will say how this can be seen geometrically, but non-elementary for us is just gamma is not isomorphic to Z. And you'll see why well, if we would not have this assumption, then there would be a contradiction in what I'm going to say, which is not a big deal, because following a suggestion by Norbert, I should put mistakes in these lectures. Right. Okay. Okay, so then we define this morning so now let me go back to well, maybe I should draw another picture. I'm sorry, I should have put the picture on this side. Let's forget about this. This is clear. I should draw the universal cover here, which covers the space. So on my picture, it's from below, but you can see it from above. And so a point here, say y bar, as a pre-image y here. And this corresponds to some element of the group, say gamma, which translates y from an amount which is small. And I will make a definition in a minute. Right, so we'll study sigma r of y, which is the set of elements in gamma, such that dy gamma y is less equal to r. And then we introduce the group gamma r of y, which is the subgroup of gamma generated by sigma r of y. So usually the notation is this one, sigma r of y into two brackets, which means exactly this. So starting from now, we'll use this very useful notation, which simplifies. And one of the propositions that Gilles stated and proved is that there is a number, epsilon 0 delta hd. Well, when we add the two assumptions that the diameter is less than d, that I will do later, and that the entropy is less than h, that I will use later, but let me mention it now. There is a number which come from this result by Breuillard, Green, and Tao, which unfortunately is not computable. So there is a part which is due to us, which is completely explicit, and there is a part which is due to Breuillard, Green, and Tao, which is not explicit. It would be nice to have an explicit version of Breuillard, Green, and Tao. We don't know how to do. Well, anyway, there is a number such that if R is taken smaller than this number, then this group, if it's not trivial, is cyclic. So this morning there was an issue about virtually cyclic. If we add these assumptions that I have erased here, which are torsion-free, then virtually cyclic is cyclic. Right. So what is cyclic? Cyclic, well, it's a subgroup. It look like Z essentially. So we need to know a little bit more of the classification of isometries, but let's stick to the two-dimensional case and to the Riemann surfaces. As you may know, a transformation which is involved in a co-compact group whose quotient is a surface, a smooth surface. All elements are hyperbolic thanks to the classification of isometries for the hyperbolic space, which means that there is an axis here, so that the element gamma on the axis acts just as a translation, and everywhere else it moves things up and down. If up, if we take a positive power of gamma, and down, if we take a negative power of gamma. And there are 2 points which are the ends of this axis, which I call gamma plus and gamma minus. And everything is moved to gamma plus when you iterate, when you take positive powers of gamma, and everything to gamma minus in the other situation. So I will state, well, I want to show the proposition that Gilles mentioned, and I will do the proof on this situation and explain how you can switch to a general delta hyperbolic space, right? So here it will be very simple. So what do we want to do? So what Gilles said this morning is that there is, so for any y, there exists a maximal cyclic subgroup called G of y, which contain gamma R of y, so subgroup of gamma. And the whole story is to work with this subgroup, and we want to study the dependence in y, and essentially show that it's constant in y. And then we'll get a contradiction if we assume that that this set is connected. So what we want to show that this set is disconnected. So I don't want to write the proposition again. It was clearly written this morning, so it's not necessary. So let me proceed with this story. First of all, I want to describe this group. Maybe I erase here. Okay. So sorry, I have to check my notes just to not make a stupid thing, say stupid thing. Okay. So, first, definition of G of y, right? Okay. So, we look at this situation here. And maximal cyclic subgroup here. Or what? No, we rule out virtual things because I assume that the full group was without torsion. So virtual imply cyclic. Virtually cyclic implies cyclic. Okay, so G of y is easy to define. Is the set of elements of gamma which preserves the 2 points. So I should not call them gamma, should call them J, such that G of gamma plus gamma minus equal gamma plus gamma minus. So the action, I'm sorry with the, so it acts at infinity, but it preserves these 2 points. right? So in particular, it preserves the axis. And it's easy to see that in that case, it is cyclic. Right. Okay, so that's the definition. So what we want to show is that the map y gives j of y is locally constant. An easy consequence, which I can draw right now, is that it will be constant on connected components of XR. Right. So we fix the R, and we look at element Y, which are in sigma R. So they do exist a gamma. So this group is not to the identity. Otherwise, it's nothing to do, right? Locally constant, imply constant on the connected components. Maybe I will try as much as I can to keep the picture. Z is Z.
Yeah, Z.
Yeah, it's cyclic.
For me, it's not cyclic, but doesn't matter. Cyclic means it comes back.
No, I use cyclic for Z. Monogene, okay. You're a friend of Bourbaki, thank you. Monogene. Yeah, let me call it cyclic if you don't mind. Yeah, sorry about that. But he's right. Monogene, yeah. Oh, okay. So if we have such a Y which is in sigma R, so such a Y so that sigma R of Y is different from neutral element, so we can move a little bit because this set is open, and I want to show that nearby the point have the same capital G. Right, so it's very easy. So let me draw Y, and a ball of radius R around Y. So I've been drawing balls for the very beginning, and I will finish the course by drawing balls again. So here are the elements of gamma which are in, well, I erase the name, in sigma R of Y. So elements which displace Y of a distance less than R. Some of them may be on the boundary because there was a strong inequality. But what happened after? Well, after there is certainly an annulus where there are no elements of the orbit because the group acts without accumulation point. So if there were no such annulus, we could have a contradiction and find a sequence of elements of the orbit which accumulate on the boundary of this set, right? Which is impossible because the group acts properly, so there is no accumulation point for the orbits. So there is a certain distance which I call beta, right? So that for gamma, gamma is not a good thing because the gamma is, I want it to be fixed in gamma minus sigma R of Y, then the distance from Y to gy is greater to R plus a certain amount. C'est beta a positive number. Right? Let me see if I took let me take a strict inequality. Right. Okay, so well, now I move a little bit to Y. So let's take Y prime at a distance from Y less than beta over 2. And so we could take even smaller, and we could always assume that Y prime is also in XR because XR is open. So we take, if the ball of radius beta over 2 around Y doesn't fit in XR, we take a smaller ball. It doesn't matter, right? But so now I want to look at sigma R of Y prime, and let's take an element inside here. Let's say gamma prime. I want to see, to show that gamma prime is here too, so that the two sets are included, one in each other. So I'll do it here. It's a straightforward consequence of the triangular inequality, as usual. If you don't draw a ball, you use triangular inequality. And so I want to study gamma prime y, y. And of course, it's less than dy y prime plus dy prime gamma prime y plus d gamma y prime, and there are primes here too. Okay, so these two quantities are equal, and so they are less than twice beta over 2. And this one, by definition of this set, is less than R, right? Is less than R. Okay. So the distance between y and gamma prime y is less than beta plus R. So the displacement of y is in this annulus, in this ball, the big ball. But there is nothing in the annulus. So it has to be here. So maybe I've not been careful with this strict or not strict inequality, but you can correct this easily. Right? Which implies that gamma prime also belongs to sigma R of y, which shows that sigma R of y prime is included in sigma R of y. And of course, we can reverse the role played by y and y prime and get sigma R of y equal sigma R of y prime. Okay? Okay? Well, that's easy. Any question at this stage? Good. What else? This is easy. So what is the conclusion? These sets are equal. But both generate groups. They generate groups, gamma R of y and gamma R prime of y, which are cyclic. So if we take an element here, it has 2 points at infinity, and the group gamma R of y is related to these 2 points in the action and the axis. The other one also. But since there are common elements here, the 2 points are always the same. So they are the same for this set and this set. So this implies that J of y equals J of y prime, because this big cyclic group is defined uniquely when you know these 2 points. Okay, classical fact, right? I'm going a bit fast because I have something else to say after. But this is it. So this group, depending on the point, the maximal cyclic group is locally constant, right? So it's constant on connected component. So now the last thing I want to show is that the space XR is not connected. Let us assume that XR is non-empty and connected. So Gilles said this morning that XR is invariant by the action of the big group. So in other words, for every G in gamma, GXR equals XR. Okay. Right. maybe I could go quickly. So from this, there is an exercise which I leave to you because it's kind of easy, so that I don't lose too much time in this part, which says that so first of all, if this is connected, since G of Y is constant in connected component, there is only one group which I call J. So the exercise is to show from this that for all G in gamma, G gamma J minus 1 is equal to J. Just by invariance. You just translate the point Y to a point G times Y, and you compare the sigmas, and you compare the gammas, and you compare the G. Right. So the consequence now is that for any element of the group, G is preserved by the conjugation. That when you conjugate element of the group, you just translate by G these 2 points. Well, if you translate it, the group which is these 2 points is different from this one. So since this exercise, which is easy to do, shows that they are the same, it means that any element of the group gamma will preserve the 2 points here. Right? Let me write it this way. And so the full group preserves 2 points on the boundary at infinity, on the boundary of the hyperbolic space, which is at infinity, and that from that it is easy to show that the full group should be equal to Z. So this is a contradiction. Okay, so I left this because I need time for the rest and for the rest of the program, but it is really easy. Once you reach this stage here and you get this, then this is completely straightforward. So the proof has been done here in the case of hyperbolic space, where X is simply connected hyperbolic metric. Well, I'm sorry, hyperbolic metric in the disk. So now, what if you want to do this in a delta hyperbolic space X? So you need only 2 things. You need the boundary at infinity, but this is known to exist. And you can, for example, look in the book by Athanase, Papadopoulos, where it is shown that there is a boundary at infinity. You need the classification of isometries. So there is something which plays the role of classification and which is here exactly the same thing. The only issue is that between 2 points there might be several geodesies. So you might have several geodesies. So an hyperbolic isometry does not necessarily have an axis, but it has a family of axes. But this family, this collection of geodesics which are axes in some sense, they are not very far apart. Something related to delta. If they were far apart, we could draw a triangle which violates the definition. So viewed from very far away, they look like very close and even the same, right? So this proof, as such, can go to the delta hyperbolic case, right? Good. And why did we do all of that? Why did we do all this mess? Just for one thing. So now that we have proved that XR is not connected, for R less than epsilon 0 delta of HG. Ah, bon. Ah. I wish I could have batteries for myself and I could change it. Because I'm getting tired. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It's working. Oh, yes, it is. I can hear myself. which is not interesting. So, yeah. So XR, now we prove that it is either empty or non-connected. In either case, X minus XR is not empty. So there is a point, let me collect X0, which is in the complement. But what is the complement? The complement is the set of points, like X0, such that for any element of the group, the distance between X0 to gamma X, to Jx0 is greater than R, or greater or equal. So we can take R equal epsilon 0. So let me take R equal epsilon 0. So it's greater than epsilon 0. And so we are here. The complement is here. There are points in the quotient where there is a ball which is big. Really a ball which does not overlap, right? And this is the key inequality. So sometimes we call it diastole. The fact that there are points like this. So I will explain this in a minute. Right, is that okay at this stage? So you have, for the students, you have to go through the proof again. But really, if you do the proof in the hyperbolic case in dimension 2, you have done it for the general case, up to some minor technical issues, right? So let me erase a few things. So now I want to switch to, well, it's not switching. I want to use it for another purpose. So let me recall the definition of the systole. How did I write? I wrote this. How did I write this? So for X in X, the systole, so small s, I put gamma here, at X is the infimum, which is indeed a minimum, of the distance from X to gamma X. And of course, we have to assume that X is not equal to the identity. And so, well, not equal to the identity. Well, we have to assume also that none of the elements have fixed point. But this is the non-torsion assumption. So no element of gamma has fixed point. Well, we don't have to assume. I mean, we may consider cases where there are fixed points, but then this will be 0 at this fixed point. And the systole with capital S of gamma of the space X is the infimum of the systole gamma of X for all X in X. So the systole here is the largest ball which do not overlap that you can draw. For people who know Riemannian geometry, this is the injectivity radius in that case. And the systole with a capital S, you have to find the smallest one, which is achieved here, right? And what we want to do now is to give a lower bound of this in terms of diameter, delta, and h. And why do we want to give a lower bound? Well, if you know the Riemann surface theory, you know that if you don't allow the systole of a surface to go to 0, then they remain in a compact set. So this lower bound here, as in the case of Riemann surfaces, will allow us to prove a compactness theorem. And this was the goal. Well, at least it's written in the title, right? Okay, so let me state the theorem. So we have delta H as usual. So delta H and D. Then there exists a number which depends on this quantity, delta H and D, such that for any non-elementary delta gamma acting, etc., properly, and so on a delta hyperbolic space, XD, which we suppose to be Boozman, and you will understand why. And let me recall that we have this assumption with extendable geodesic. And so on, and diameter of X over gamma is bounded by D, and entropy of XD is bounded above by H, and as usual we use the counting measure. Then the systole gamma of X is bounded below by this number, which is assumed to be positive. Right. Which means for any gamma in gamma, the distance, and for any X in X, the distance X to gamma X is bounded below by epsilon 0. Epsilon 0 being this number. Okay. And okay, this systole is an important invariant. And so non-elementary, I didn't add the assumption, underlying assumption is that no torsion. So no virtual things. Okay. So the systole is a very important invariant. There is a paper by Gromov, 140 or 60 pages on this subject, where he proved beautiful inequalities. And it's important, as you can see on surfaces, if you bound from below the systole, then you get compactness results. But the good thing with surfaces is that if you have a small systole, then you have a large neighborhood, then you have a big diameter. And so bounding the diameter boils down to bounding from below the systole. But in our setup, it's not clear. This is not, we cannot use that. So we have to do more. At this stage, more is almost nothing. All right, so the word systole comes from cardiology, right? It has something to do with the heartbeat. And diastole too, right? Who knows that? What does systole mean? The smallest part of it when you look at the heartbeat? Or no, okay. Look in a, you know. Yeah, this is a, yeah, okay. Well, in fact, it was invented by my former advisor, Marcel Berger, and while he was doing this kind of things, similar kind of things, before Gromov, when his daughter was studying cardiology, she eventually became cardiologist. I mean, when you look for a name, you look for a name, wherever you have to look, okay? Diastole, it's, I don't know who invented this, maybe us, actually, I don't know. Okay, so you see the stuff, always the same thing. We want to work with these three invariants, which I recall is the diameter. This is lower bound of the curvature, and this plays the whole upper bound of the curvature. It's very elementary, and it's a corollary of the last version of Bishop-Gromov inequality that I have proved yesterday afternoon. Right, let me start here. Okay, so there is a lemma. I love lemma, which I like very much. So it takes more time to write the lemma than to prove it. So always in the same situation, right? Okay, so we take R positive, X in X, and what else? Gamma in gamma, and we assume that there exists a point y0, which may depend on these data, such that the infimum of the distance from y0 to all gamma k y0 is greater than some number, say epsilon positive. Well, later it's going to be epsilon 0, but so far it's not necessary to do this, and of course gamma should not be equal to the identity. And furthermore, so this is I'm still in the assumption this is less than R, right? Or less or equal. Then the distance from X to gamma X divided by 4 times R is greater than, so don't worry, I will explain. 1 plus mu y0 gamma b y0 for R plus epsilon over 2 mu y0 gamma b y0 epsilon over 2 plus 1 to the minus 1. Okay, so let me explain this. So this is our version of the Collar theorem. So I erase the picture that I will do again now. So the Collar theorem says that if you have a small loop here, you have a big collar. Right? In particular, if you take a point here, then the displacement in the universal cover is small. And if you want to have a reasonable displacement, you have to go far away. So if you stay not very far from this point, so this should be, for example, y0, and this should be x. If you stay not too far from this point, then the displacement should be not too big. And that's, I'm sorry, should be not too big. Vice versa, if you have a point, I'm sorry, and now the picture is different. If you have a point which is not too far from a point whose displacement is bounded below, this one cannot be too small. Otherwise, this one had to be very far. So this is the Collar theorem, but expressed in the converse way. So, yeah? So this is a point whose displacement is not too small. So it is somewhere here, say. This is a point which is not too far, so it has to be here. And so the displacement here is not too small. But as usual, we want to control the not too small. Are there any questions? Maybe I mess around there. And, as usual, we want to control, and how can we control this stuff? Only with Bishop-Gromov ratio. So eventually I have to explain this. This is the only thing. And once we are here, we take epsilon equal epsilon 0, and we have a formula which involves all the parameters. So let me be a bit more precise about this. And I think I will stop at the end of this proof. Right? It's amazing to be to have a Collar theorem in this situation where there is no curvature. Usually it's related to curvature. Right. So we look at the action of gamma. We look at gamma x, gamma 2x, and so on. Well, it's assumed it is on an axis, and y is here, and y is translated, and so on. And we draw this. So this distance is less than r. So if this is gamma k y0, the distance is less than r. And we look at what happened when you look at the translate of x, say, in a ball of radius 2r. So I draw the pictures just to let you follow the proof. So let's call G the subgroup generated by gamma. which is essentially the set of gamma k's for k in Z. Right? And we look at distance from x to gamma kx. And as usual, we decompose in x gamma x plus gamma x gamma square x plus etc. And all these numbers are equal because you can simplify because the group acts by isometry. So this is less than k times d of x gamma x. Right. We really want to study d of x gamma x for a given gamma. Right. So when is it less than 2r? The fix r. When is it less than 2r? Well, it's obvious. It's when k is not too big. So how many k do we have here? If we have k, we have minus k except for 0. So probably it is something like integer part of this quantity, right? And we have twice the integer part, and in 0 we have only 1, so minus 1. So this is, am I correct here? It's obvious, right? So this bracket for me, because I'm an old guy, it means integer part. Now the notations have changed, and I don't understand. So I'm still using this, right? So this is obvious. And why am I interested in when this is less than 2r? Because counting the number of elements such that this expression is less than 2r is exactly measuring at x for the group J, the powers of gamma, positive or negative, the ball centered at x and of radius 2r. Right, so we are almost done actually. In fact, because we have strict inequality, I should put a bar here. Doesn't really matter. I mean, we can be a bit more careful. Right, and so this integer part is greater than the quantity inside minus 1. So if I replace, I'll get 2, so 4r dx gamma x minus 2. This is plus 1, I'm sorry. Sorry, I apologize. This was plus 1. Yeah, I'm stupid. This is plus 1. Sorry. I forgot I forgot the 0. So, but this is greater than this. This integer part is greater than the quantity minus 1. Twice will be twice the quantity minus 2 plus 1 minus 1. And so we get this inequality. Right, and we say, perfect, we are done. We have to estimate. So Bishop allows to estimate volumes of balls. Well, the problem is that in our theory, we don't have Bishop theorem. It's very strange. We don't have Bishop theorem, but we have the more sophisticated one, which is Bishop-Gromov. So we can estimate ratios, but not measures of ball alone. And the second thing which is bad is that we have a subgroup here. Okay, so but if we can reach the stage where we can use Bishop-Gromov, then this subgroup story is not very difficult because yesterday I showed how to go from a subgroup to a general group. So let me finish. Yes, I'll be done. Right. Right, I'm sorry, I erased the picture. So, okay, on the picture, which you have not erased on your paper, you can check that if d of x gamma kx is less than 2r, then d of y0 gamma k y0 is less than, so there were verticals which were r each, so it's less than 4r. Which is easy to prove just using triangular inequality again. So this is less than mu y0 j b bar y0 for R. And now, since capital G is a subgroup of gamma, we can use nothing at the moment. We have to do something else. So let me write it here. As I said before, I don't know how to bound from above this quantity, right? So if I want to bound it from above, I have to divide by another measure. But then this, what I will be writing below, I don't know a priori. Well, but there is a way to circumvent this, is to take this epsilon here. So let me write this B of y0 epsilon. So why is it true? I had this inequality, and now I say it's true when I divide by this. Well, it's true because of this assumption. So how many points of the orbit of y0 are in a ball of radius epsilon? All points are outside because of this inequality. Gamma k y0 is at distance greater than epsilon from y0, except when you take the identity here. So there is only one. So when you measure with this measure, you should not forget to measure the identity. And so this is equal to 1. Right? That's the trick. And then we use what I did last time at the very end of the lecture. And you replace this by the counting measure for the big group. And what you get is, let me write it here, 4R plus epsilon over 2 divided by mu 0 gamma B of y epsilon over 2. This was the last inequality I proved yesterday. So the only trick is to remark this. If we have this kind of inequality, in the ball of radius epsilon around y0, there is only one point of the orbit of y0, which is y0 itself. So when you apply the counting measure, you get 1. Right. So this is it. Plus 1 on the other side, and you reverse, and okay, this is it. Maybe it's y0 here. Okay, so now we are very good. I can finish quietly. Any question? Okay. So now I want to use the diastole. So I know that there is a point y0 which satisfies this with the number before, this epsilon 0 which came from the lecture this morning. So I want to use this point. Let me erase this because it's not correct at this stage. So the diastole that I did just before implies that there is a point x0 such that this inf is greater than epsilon 0, this fancy number depending on delta H and D, which is positive. So there is a point which is in a thick part. That's what we did last time, which means exactly this. And of course, K has to be non-equal to the identity. Right, so let's apply this. The only issue is this. This point may not be close to X, on capital X. So X0 may not be close to X. Well, we have a compact quotient, and as usual, fact that there is a compact quotient of finite diameter implies that there is an element. So I've been careful with notations. So let me check my notations. There is an element in the group, G0, which brings X0 close to X. Closeness is given by D. Right? No, it's not X0. No, it is X0. So I will call it Y0. Well, okay. So we have a Y0 which is called 2X, but why does it satisfy this now? Well, it's just a very easy thing. So we have to verify this for a translate of G0, and this is obvious. So let's look at Y0 gamma K Y0. So this is distance from G0 X0 gamma K G0 X0. And so this is a distance from X0 G0 minus 1 conjugate of gamma K G0 X0, right? But this inequality here was true for any should have put J, any J not equal to the, so this systolic inequality is true for any element of the group, so this is certainly greater than epsilon 0. Right, okay. So we can indeed apply this lemma with R equal to D, R equal to D, and epsilon equal to epsilon 0. Right. And now we can estimate this from below by estimating this from above, and we use our Bishop-Gromov inequality, which includes only D, and this epsilon contains D, H, and delta. And we get a formula, which I don't want to write. Okay. And this is more or less the end of the story for today. I just want to point out, I'll let you write, and then I will point out an important fact. Do you have any question? It's a bit of a mess, yeah, no, it's very hot today, right? So the important fact is that we are using Bishop-Gromov for the small radius could be very small. So we had to extend Bishop-Gromov to small radii, and that we did yesterday. But we did yesterday with this extra assumption on the space, which we assume to be Boozman and with extendable geodesic. That's why I added this assumption in the statement of the theorem. Right? Yeah, we would not be able to do this without this extra assumption, because we would not be able to estimate this quantity. And indeed, if you don't assume that the space is Boozman, just delta hyperbolic, I mean, I'm pretty sure that you can modify locally the space in order to have a small systole which is local, and for which we cannot say anything. So there are plenty of example and counter-example in our paper, but we show that this is really the best form possible, at least with these notions. Okay, so I'm done. I stop here.